Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something pretty serious. We're going to be tackling abductions in Kenya.
Yeah,
It's unfortunately becoming more and more relevant these days.
right.
Just between June and December of this year, over 100 people have been reported abducted.
Wow.
So yeah, we need to talk about this. We're
Absolutely.
going to unpack what's actually happening, what the legal side of it is, but most importantly, what can you do to stay safe
Right.
and get this rest? There's a case where a family actually successfully sued for wrongful abduction. So knowing your rights can really make a difference.
It's true. That case shows how important it is to understand the law and how it can protect you and your loved ones.
Yeah.
But before we get into specific cases, let's define what we're even talking about. What exactly is abduction under Kenyan law?
Okay. Yeah, lay it on us.
Well, Section 256 of the Penal Code says it pretty clearly. Abduction is taking someone against their will, usually through force or deception, and that covers a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, wider than you think. It's not just the stereotypical stranger danger kidnapping.
Exactly. It's everything from unlawful arrests by authorities to, yeah, those more classic kidnapping scenarios.
Right.
And the reason it's such a serious offense is human rights. Abduction disregards the fundamental rights in the Kenyan Constitution, the right to dignity, freedom and security in Article 28, and freedom of movement and residence in Articles 29 and 39.
It's like someone just ripping those rights away, totally ignoring the core values of the Constitution.
Right.
So what kind of legal muscle is there to fight back? We do have laws against this, right?
We do. Section 257 of the Penal Code says the punishment can be up to 7 years in prison for those found guilty.
Okay.
But it's not always easy to get a conviction, especially in cases with unknown perpetrators or not enough solid evidence.
Which makes understanding the proper procedures around arrest and detention even more important.
Exactly.
Okay, walk me through this.
Yeah.
What should a lawful arrest look like in Kenya? Let's say I'm being arrested. What are my rights and what should I expect?
First, you have the right to be told why you're being arrested. The officer has to tell you exactly why they're detaining you. They can't just drag you off without a clear explanation.
Got it. So no shady business.
Yeah.
They have to tell me why.
Right. And they also have to tell you about your other rights. Like you have the right to remain silent and the right to a lawyer. You're allowed to have a lawyer with you during any questioning.
So even if I'm innocent and feel pressured, I shouldn't say anything without a lawyer.
Exactly. Having a lawyer there makes sure your rights are protected the whole time.
Okay.
Now, once they tell you about the charges and your rights, you'll be taken into custody. But here's the important part. Even in custody, they can't torture you or treat you inhumanely.
Okay, well, that's somewhat reassuring.
Right.
But obviously the goal isn't to stay locked up forever.
No, of course not. And that's where the next stage comes in. Your court appearance. Within 48 hours of your arrest, you have to be brought in front of a judge. This is non-negotiable. It's where the court makes sure your detention is legal.
So the judge is like a check on the police's power, making sure they have a real reason to keep me there.
Precisely. And at this point, you can have your lawyer there to help you during questioning or anything else. And then after the court appearance, the judge will decide to either grant you bail or keep you in custody while they keep investigating.
Okay, so even if I can't go free right away, at least the court process has started
Yeah.
and they're thinking about my rights.
Exactly. And here's the big takeaway. Anytime they don't follow these steps, that's a huge red flag. It could mean your rights are being violated and you can take legal action.
This is so important. It's not enough just to know the law. It's knowing how to use it to protect yourself if something happens.
Right.
Speaking of real-life examples, you mentioned a story about a woman named Wanjiku earlier.
Yeah. Wanjiku's story is a powerful reminder that knowing your rights and going to court can really make a difference. She was abducted by rogue police officers, held for weeks with no communication.
Wow.
Her family had no idea where she was or if she was even alive.
That must have been awful for them, not knowing anything. What happened?
It was a nightmare for them. But they didn't give up. They sued for her wrongful detention, and incredibly, they won. The court gave them millions in compensation.
Wow, that's a huge win, not just for them, but for anyone who's been illegally detained.
It is, and it shows something really important. Unlawful detentions don't just hurt individuals, they cost a lot of money. The money for Wanjiku's family came from taxpayer funds.
Oh, wow.
It makes you wonder how often this happens and who's really paying the price.
That's something I hadn't thought about, the financial side of it. But even beyond the money, the emotional toll on the family must be huge.
Of course.
What's it like for the people left behind?
It's devastating. Imagine always worrying, not knowing if your loved one is safe or even alive. That takes a huge toll.
Like constant dread hanging over everything.
Exactly. And then there's the financial stress. Families might feel like they have to pay bribes to get their loved one back. or they have to pay tons of legal fees to try to get justice.
So it's a double whammy, emotional trauma plus financial hardship. This is some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But let's get practical. What can our listeners do if they think someone is being abducted? Who should they call? What should they do?
The most important thing is to act fast. Time is critical. Call 999, the police emergency line. That's the fastest way to get the authorities involved.
Okay, 999, got it. But what if someone doesn't feel comfortable going to the police? Are there other options?
Absolutely. You can report it to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA. They investigate police misconduct, including illegal arrests and detentions.
So they're like extra accountability, making sure the police are doing things right.
Exactly.
So they have a number people can call.
Yeah, it's AO20-490-600.
Okay, 020-490-6000 for IPOA. Any other organizations people should know about?
Yes, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, or KNCHR. They work to protect human rights in Kenya and can help with abduction cases. Their number is 0726-610-159.
Okay, so we have 999 for the police, 020-490-6000 for IPOA, and 0726-610-159 for KNCHR. It's great to have these resources, but it still seems overwhelming if you're in that situation. What's the main thing to remember?
Don't wait to act. Every second counts. The faster you report it, the better chance there is of a good outcome. It can be the difference between life and death.
Wow, that's powerful. But let's talk about being proactive. What can people do to stay safe and not become a victim in the first place?
Great question. One of the simplest but most effective things is to always tell someone where you're going. Tell a friend or family member your plans and when you'll be back.
No more solo missions without checking in.
Right, and try to avoid being alone in isolated places, especially at night. Stick to places that are well lit and have people around.
So it's about being aware of your surroundings, not making yourself an easy target.
Exactly. And finally, trust your gut. If something feels off or dangerous, just get out of there. Don't worry about being polite. Your safety's more important.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
It reminds me, we all have that inner voice that can warn us about danger. But even with precautions, abductions still happen. It makes me wonder how these crimes affect Kenyan society as a whole. What's the bigger picture here?
That's a crucial question. When abductions happen, especially when law enforcement is involved, it makes people lose trust in the institutions that are supposed to protect them.
Yeah.
It weakens our democracy and creates this feeling of fear and uncertainty.
It's like a domino effect. One violation leads to another.
Exactly. And every abduction that goes unpunished just makes the criminals bolder. They think there are no consequences.
Yeah.
And that makes it even harder to stop this from happening.
That's a sobering thought. But this isn't just a problem in Kenya, is it?
No, you're right. Illegal detentions and human rights violations happen everywhere.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to talk about this.
Because knowing our rights and speaking out against injustice matters no matter where you live.
Exactly.
It's about standing up for what's right.
You got it. We can't stay silent. We have to hold people in power accountable and demand justice for every victim.
So this isn't just about Kenya. It's a global call to action.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, what are the key things you want people to remember?
First, understanding what abduction actually is. It's not just kidnappings, it's any detention that's against the law. Second, knowing your rights if you're ever arrested or detained. Remember the things we talked about, like being told the charges, having a lawyer?
Right. Those are essential. And knowing how and where to report a suspected abduction.
Yes, definitely. We talked about the police hotline IPOA and the KNCHR. Those numbers are important.
Yeah.
And lastly, remember those practical safety tips. Tell people where you're going, avoid isolated areas, and trust your gut. Those might seem like small things, but they can really make a difference.
It's about being informed and knowing what to do. But we're not done yet. There's so much more to talk about. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore the psychological effects of abduction and how the media shapes the way we see it. Stay tuned.